Good afternoon. Good afternoon. The Regents are returning from lunch, and we are wanting to just take a couple minutes to bring on Regent Redmond so that we can honor Regent Redmond as she moves along to another needed position within the state of Washington. So I want to acknowledge that Regent Redmond joined us and is concluding her service as a Washington State Regent, a Washington State University Regent today. So she's stepping down. She's been appointed to serve on a different board by Governor Inslee. We are sad to see her leave. And I, for one, have appreciated and benefited from your perspective, your lived expertise, and your leadership. And so it is a bit bittersweet to be able to celebrate you and at the same time wish you all of the success in this new position that you are stepping into with the governor and the state of Washington. While I know that you are uncomfortable with recognition and awards, we do want to be able to provide a recognition for your service. And so I have a commendation I'd like to read, and then I'd love to open it up for the board to provide any feedback. And then for you, Heather, if you have anything that you might want to say. So let me begin by just saying, to honor Regent Redmond, this commendation has been prepared, and that I will ask for a vote to adopt the resolution commemorating Regent Redmond's service tomorrow at our board meeting. Whereas on October 12th, 2017, Governor Jay Inslee appointed Heather Redmond to the Washington State Board of Regents, and in 2021, reappointed her for a second term. And whereas Regent Redmond brought to the board the experience and wisdom from her distinguished career, providing leadership through incorporating a mindset of forward thinking and innovation to advance the priorities of the university to better serve the public good and communities statewide. And whereas throughout her tenure, Regent Redmond brought valuable collegiality and enriched the board's deliberations with her clear insight, integrity, experience, and wise counsel. And whereas Regent Redmond provided outstanding guidance and leadership to the Board of Regents, including service on the Institutional Infrastructure Committee, Finance and Administration Committee, Strategic and Operational Excellence Committees. She has served as the Regent representative on the WSU Foundation Investment Committee. And whereas the Regents, the administration, the faculty, the staff, and the students of Washington State University have greatly benefited from her leadership and dedication to the university. And whereas Regent Redmond's service as a member of this board can be characterized by her steadfast commitments to the state of Washington, this institution and its faculty, staff, and students, as well as to her fellow Regents. And whereas it is the earnest hope of the Board of Regents that she continues to be a loyal friend and proponent of Washington State University and a champion of higher education in the state of Washington. Now, therefore, be it resolved that Heather Redmond be commended for her dedication and service to Washington State University in the state of Washington, and be it further resolved that the members of the Board of Regents of Washington State University, speaking on behalf of the entire Cougar Nation, acknowledge with deep gratitude and profound appreciation the contributions of Heather Redmond to Washington State University. Dated the 19th day of April, 2024. So we'll do this tomorrow, and will be presented for approval at the board meeting. Heather, it's great to see you. We wish you were here in person, but just really want to thank you for your time, your commitment, and your leadership.
Thank you. That was very, very lovely. And I wish I were there too.
I would, if I could, like to lend a few comments. And Heather, just let me express my appreciation for your service as a regent. I remember Colleen Kerr and I sitting down and meeting in your office when we were trying to talk you into this opportunity that's just a couple hours a month. So But I think during your tenure, you've pushed leadership to think big and broad and not always just do the status quo. And I appreciate that. Maybe at the time I didn't appreciate it as much, but I appreciated the fact that let's think about, should we do things differently? And maybe it's controversial, but if that's the right path to take, then we need to consider it and not dismiss it outright. You opened a lot of doors to WSU, to myself and our foundation team across the state, but particularly in the greater Seattle area, and particularly the Seattle tech community and the venture fund community. And so I thank you for continuing to find ways to get us to meet people and advance the university. And then I appreciate your work on the foundation board, particularly around the investment board. And you brought a strong set of principles around ESG and some other things that you thought maybe needed to be considered a little bit more strongly than had been. And given your background and accomplishments, your suggestions there carry a lot of weight in the room. So we just appreciate so much what you did, and know that we have a Coug for life in the Seattle area. So thank you so much.
Any other members of the board want to say anything?
Oh, I have to.
Okay.
Yes.
Regent Ramos.
I also want to extend my deep appreciation. And on a people level, what I've really appreciated about you, Heather, is just your steadfast interest in the morale and the team health. You talk about that, but you also walk that talk behind the scenes. She's actively mentoring people outside, out and about. And I just view you as an example citizen of not just Washington State, but of the world. You know how to make big things happen and look around the corner. And those were just great examples of things I wanted to just learn how to do better from you. So thank you. We're really going to miss you. Just appreciate all that you've done. And remember, go Cougs everywhere you go. We'll have to send you more Coug wear.
Heather, when you came on the board, you added a brand new dimension that we actually didn't have. And I think one of the strengths of our board is that we have people from all different walks of life and experiences, both career and life experiences. And what you brought to us with your knowledge and skills from the venture community, but just your insights. And I think as Jen just mentioned, the ability to really think big and think creatively out of the box. And it has been such a tremendous help to the board and our decision making. But I think we've all learned from you. And I just appreciate all you've done. And yours are going to be big shoes to fill by somebody.
Heather, I just want to say thank you for everything you've done for WSU. You're a badass and you're stylish. All that you have done, and I'll miss that you're not going to be with us, but off to better things. So thank you for everything. Appreciate it.
Heather, we will miss you. I'm grateful that we had a chance to get to know each other through Regent, and I'm only regret having 1 year to serve with you, but you are a big thinker, and you are such a contributor. You add such gravitas to the conversation and the ultimate decisions that we make, and we're going to miss that very much. Thank you.
Heather, I want to say how much I've appreciated all the conversations I've had with you. There are tidbits of advice you've given me on how things are done in industry, how things are done differently other places. And I think about them a lot and think about, how do I incorporate this into my teaching? How do I incorporate this into our policy for how we do things at the university? And so your wisdom is greatly appreciated, and I'll certainly miss having those opportunities to talk with you more.
All right, Heather, if you were here, we would be high-fiving you and celebrating you in person. But since you're not, I just really appreciate you being able to call in. I know actually you have your meeting that you're a part of right now for this other board.
Yes,
And
yes.
so
Yeah,
appreciate it.
I wish I could, live many lifetimes and clone myself to do a bunch of things simultaneously, because it's very painful to leave you all and to leave WSU. But I know that there are many wonderful people who can fill my shoes, despite the terrific comments that you've made. And one of the things that I've always believed is that board refreshment is a great thing. So I think you will have a new regent who will be just fabulous and will add that next layer of greatness to the team and to the mix. But I do want to just say that I have learned so much from all of you, but also just so much from the experience of being a regent and being part of higher education. The interaction with the faculty, with the administration, and most importantly, with the students, and just with the enterprise of trying to educate and trying to help the state in doing the research that we do, and all of the difficulties of doing that in the environment that we are in the society that we are in, and in the, the ever-changing set of difficulties that we have with COVID and funding and budgets and, just what the world throws at us every day. It has been such an education for me, and I know it has been for all of us, that I just I couldn't have imagined how valuable it would be for me in everything else that I do. So I feel like, despite what, you've all said about what I've given, I've certainly gotten more than I've given in terms of the value of the experience to me. And I appreciate it so much. So thank you all for letting me do this work alongside of you. And I certainly don't plan to lose touch with any of you, and I don't plan to stop serving at WSU or the state of Washington. In fact, I'll go do that in the other room. But certainly go Cougs. And thank you all for this very nice moment. I will treasure it.
Thank you, Heather. And it does feel appropriate to do a Go Cougs for Heather. So 1, 2, 3. Go Cougs! All right, well, it's time to pass the meeting over to Regent Pika for the Academic and Student Affairs Committee.
Thank you, Chair Shower. She will be missed. I also welcome to the Academic and Student Affairs Committee meeting. And I want to just acknowledge some of the other committee members, Regents Blankenship, Howell, McDonald, and Marroquin. Thank you for serving on this committee. And we have 3 future items that we need to review today. And these items are currently being planned to be voted on at our September meeting. And I'd like to invite WSU Provost and Executive President Elizabeth Chilton to present these 3 items. But first, in your role as a chancellor of the Pullman campus, we have a very exciting announcement to make to our leadership team.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you. Many of you have met him, but I wanted to formally announce to you our new Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs for the Pullman campus, who also oversees the Dean of Students Office for the whole system, Ramondo Nash. Would you mind standing? Ramondo is on day 18 in his new role. Comes to us from the University of Nevada, Reno, where he served as Vice President for Student Life and Services. Before that, he served at San Jose State as the Associate Dean of Students, and also the University of Southern California. And there are many others. He has a broad range of, student-facing support and services, and already in 18 days has really hit the ground running. So I don't know if you wanted to say anything or just wanted to formally welcome you to WSU.
Thank you. And the only thing I'll say is happy to be here. Looking forward to working with you all, and having met a lot of folks in this room already, continuing to look forward to work with you all, but ready to hit the ground running and do what we need to do for students.
Yes. In fact, he'll be presenting later at in the Finance Committee. So we're already getting him in front of you. So thank you, Armando. Okay, so as Regent Pika mentioned, we have 3 degrees to present to you. They are all in your packets. First, we have a proposal to establish a Master's of Veterinary Anatomic Pathology degree. And I'm just going to pull this up here. This is being proposed by the College of Veterinary Medicine and the Department of Veterinary Microbiology and Pathology. Really, this is to adopt a sequential training model where incoming students will spend the first 3 years focused on the veterinary anatomic pathology degree in a professionally oriented master's offered through the graduate school. And then after completing residency training, the students then who are interested in research can transition into a PhD program in the College of Veterinary Medicine to complete their graduate training. But by separating it into these two components, the proposal is to really allow students who want to receive just one of those degrees or even have the opportunity to transition, but sort of separate them and make the curriculum more clear and accessible to meet the demand for this degree. I think you all recognize that there's a great need for training in veterinary pathology and immunological infectious disease. This is really building on that tradition. As you know, we never present things to you until they have been approved by the Faculty Senate, has done so. And if you do approve this tomorrow, just to mention, for all 3 degree programs, we still do have to get them approved through our accrediting body, the NWCCU, who also submits them to the Department of Ed. But the first step is for you all to approve before we can move forward with that. Any questions that I would have the ability to answer?
Should we act on each one of these as we go?
You don't need to act, just tomorrow you will,
I
but
meant as far as moving it to an action item.
that's above my.
I was thinking more we would present all 3 and then perhaps we could consider that.
Yeah, that sounds fine.
Yeah, okay.
That's fine if you're all ready to move on. The second proposal is to establish a Bachelor of Science in Public Health. You may recall that this was part of our state budget request last year, and so we did receive some additional funding to create the Bachelor in Public Health. This is really to meet the public health workforce demands. Obviously the pandemic put a spotlight on deficiencies that we have in the workforce, as well as the ongoing opioid crisis and burgeoning stimulant use. And so the program is proposing to build upon the academic strengths that we have at WSU, and especially in infectious disease and behavioral health, to prepare graduate students to enter a modern public health system at a public, private, or nonprofit levels. It's really informed by the community and really includes feedback from rural, remote, and underserved populations as well. This was also reviewed by the Provost's office, as well as the Faculty Senate approved it on April 4th. Trying to think if there's any other details that would be pertinent to you, but it would establish this degree for the WSU Pullman, Spokane, and Vancouver campuses.
Any questions on that specifically? And the third?
Okay, last but not least, we have the Bachelor of Arts in Social Work degree for the WSU Tri-Cities campus. And luckily we have our Chancellor of the Tri-Cities campus here in case there are campus-specific questions. This is led by the College of Nursing. The Bachelor of Arts in Social Work will prepare students for generalist practice to promote human and social well-being, focusing on prevention, support, and adjustment for social and psychological needs. Obviously, this is something also that really the pandemic highlighted as a great workforce need, particularly in rural, tribal, and underserved regions of the state. This was also approved by the, reviewed by the Provost's office, but approved by the Faculty Senate. Did I leave out anything pertinent, Sandra?
So are there any questions regarding any of those that are being proposed?
I don't have any questions. I just I'm excited about the new programs and the potential to serve Washington State more broadly. And I know there's a significant amount of work that goes into this, and I just really appreciate all that the faculty is doing to promote new innovative programs for WSU.
As a student, I'm excited to hear, just to see new programs that are just exciting to students. I mean, I'm graduating, maybe I'll come back. I'm kidding. But maybe it's worth, it just opens the door to so many new students and to continue to develop what we offer and continue to keep that competitive edge. I appreciate that and all the work.
I have a question. When the Faculty Senate reviews this and you're looking at criteria when you're establishing a new program, some of the criteria, for example, the how many students might sign up, and is there a bar on that, or is that a consideration that is discussed by the group?
Yeah, I mean, Judy might be able to give a little more insider information on review of degree proposals, but usually we're asking for the numbers of students expected to enroll, the faculty resources, a pro forma budget, just so that we understand, is there additional investment? Do you have the resources you need to stand this up? And we typically ask, you know, the provost office review, we try to ask the hard questions before it goes to the Faculty Senate, such as, have you done a market study? Craig Parks in our office often reaches out to other colleges and universities in the state and the Pacific Northwest to make sure we're not duplicating something that's available in 6 other places, and really assessing the demand, because even if we're not hiring new faculty, there are opportunity costs at setting up a new degree program, and especially if it fails, that often with the state, you know, doesn't make us look very good. So we want to make sure that we've done our diligence on that.
Good. All right, thank you. And I would like to, if there's no objections, to propose that we take this off as a future and make it an action item for tomorrow's meeting. Any objections to that? Terrific. So moving on, we have 2 action items, and I would like to call on the Associate Vice Chancellor of Student Affairs and Dean of Students, Jenna Hyatt. Jenna?
Thank you very much. You may recall just this morning, Karen Metzner, who serves as my deputy and the Associate Dean of Students, and she was a helpful architect in one of these 2 WAC changes. So I thought it'd be really helpful to have her here and valuable. So thank you for this opportunity. You may recall from the last meeting, the 2 WAC changes. This first one, the proposed rule change for WAC 504-2430 is proposed in order to do two main things. One is to update and clarify rules around the first year living requirement. If you recall, with regard to the definition of how many credits first year students are coming in, the running start issue with regard to students from high school to college is what we're looking for. So it clears that up for our students to allow for them to understand the expectation we have of them, and with regard to the commitment made for the Pullman campus residential experience. The second is to update the language to be more inclusive. This takes away areas specifically such as mother and father, replaces it with parent, removes gendered language that we think is very important from official policies and regulations. Questions on that WAC? I will move on to the next one. This next is a proposed WAC change for 504-26. There are 2 main asks of, with regard to this change. Is one is the emergency rulemaking. This is to allow for a smaller number of people for quorum for the University Conduct Board cases. If you recall, we have 3 different types of hearing boards: an academic integrity board, a university appeals board, and a university conduct board. The second part of this WAC change addresses regular rulemaking, which is where we're filing a proposed change to allow for a smaller number of people for quorum or for University Conduct Board and Academic Integrity Hearing Board matters, which would be effective fall of 2024. We're also proposing to remove the stipulation that the Center for Community Standards, led by Karen, cannot assist with board recruiting as it limits our office's ability to increase our pool of board members, so allows for that support. The point of this and why it matters is that we hope to limit our need to ever have less than it currently exists within the code, but this allows the regulation and codifies the ability to do it if we need it. The direct impact is growing and increasing. I think this morning's presentation with artificial intelligence, AI, is a good indicator and demonstrates what we're seeing in terms of the need for these boards to be nimble and fast and proceed so that there isn't a disparate impact on our students as they're going through these processes. Without this, what we're seeing is the backlog and disparate of months, sometimes over a year, to get students to these boards. And so we believe that as we looked and did a review, that if we are able to adapt to and adjust the system that is a part of the circumstance, then we think that that's going to benefit our students, benefit the faculty that are proposing the concerns and interests with regard to the type of behaviors that they're reporting, and allow for a shorter time frame. Did I miss anything? Got it all. Okay. Good. Any questions?
Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Tomorrow, those will be action items we will vote on. We have one informational item, and I'll ask Rhoda Shulman to come back and present this.
Right, thank you. This is revisions to the faculty manual. Really, this is a masterful cleanup. I think Regent McDonald had a lot to do with this particular revision. I will give a very high level, but I know that you have much more detail. But really, this is providing routine annual revisions to language, but really this was a much deeper dive to update language and style to ensure consistency. Specifically, section 2 on freedom, responsibility, and discipline was revised in detail to update the tone, to use terms like complainant and respondent rather than accuser and accused. And indicate different levels of responsibility, whether it was the chair or the dean or the unit, who exactly is responsible for which pieces, really following in line with how we operationalize the manual, but making sure that the operationalizing is consistent with the manual itself. Executive Policy 13, which is responding to allegations of research misconduct, was revised with specific details that are set by outside agencies, for example. The faculty manual, just for your information, is really the purview of the Faculty Senate. Occasionally, the Provost's office or others will point out misalignments or changes to policy that might affect it, but then the Faculty Senate itself as a body reviews changes, and these were approved also at the April 4th Faculty Senate meeting. You have the 126 pages, I think, document in your packet, which is fully redlined with every single change. Regent McDonald, would you want to add anything to my overview?
Just a couple things. I really appreciate that we work with the AG's office with Adam. We work with governance and policy with Danielle, and we work with people from HRS, and that input and that willingness of those three groups to partner with us on policy is really helpful. I think we're starting to move towards the manual that I think I want to see. I don't think we're there yet. I think we have a lot more work to do, but it's been really nice to have the group of faculty, the 11 faculty representing many campuses in departments, and then to have that partnership with people like Danielle and Zami and Adam.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, thank you. this concludes our Academic and Student Affairs Committee meeting.
Great. Thank you, Regent Pika. We're ready to now move to our Finance and Administration Committee meeting chaired by Regent Ramos.
Great, thank you, Chair Shower, and welcome everyone to the Board of Regents Finance and Administration Committee meeting. And before I get started, I do want to acknowledge Regent Cerna, Regent McDonald, and Regent Shetler for participating in all of the pre-work and preparatory meetings that come before this session. Also like to highlight and recognize Executive Vice President for Finance and Administration and our CFO, Leslie Brunelli, and her entire team. They are deeply talented, and their heart and their minds are so dedicated to WSU that I just had to acknowledge that. We have a lot to cover, but before I start, I do want to acknowledge the public comment that came before us in March. And someone commented that we appeared cavalier in the way we communicated the seriousness and the gravity of our finance discussion. And I think it's important for us to convey that we listen to those inputs and that we really do want to take the feedback and modify how we show up. So that was my personal infomercial and follow-up from that public comment. So we have 5 information items, 4 future action items, and 10 action items that we had previously reviewed in March. We will start today's meeting by reviewing, our next information. I think I'm off. The first information item is an internal audit update provided by Chief Audit Executive Heather Lopez. Thanks for joining us today.
Good afternoon. I have a semi-annual. Right now I report 2 times a year to you. And in the prep meeting with Regent Ramos, she encouraged give more current up-to-date information. That's kind of hard to do on a semi-annual report. So this report in writing is reflecting up to December 31st, but with some positive notes on actions and activities that have happened since then up to current date. What I usually start with is resources. We're a small audit shop, and as you know, we've struggled with staffing over the last several years. And the current date note is we have no vacancies in our audit staff. We're fully filled as of this report date, which is pretty awesome for us. We're actually able to get out and do a lot more of what we're here to do in our proactive assurance audits. So hitting the ground on that. We had a few changes from the start of the year. If I were to report only what happened up to December 31st, it wouldn't have been as positive. We had a vacancy for over a year in an auditor position that was filled in February. We had a vacancy in January that, with the support of leadership, we're able to very quickly be proactive on an opportunity that came up and fill that with an experienced auditor. So my team right now, I feel good about their experience, have a breadth of knowledge and years of experience in business processing and controls in areas that I think can add value to a lot of the audits and activities that we look at. So like I said, we've hit the ground running starting off this year for sure at the start of the year. And I feel pretty confident that this year, for the first time in about 4 years, we're going to actually be able to meet our goal of at least 80% of the audit plan completed by the end of the year with the staffing. And one other thing I'll touch on, and then I'll take questions, is the second page of your 2-page update. I have a little graph in there just to show you our office. We do audits. We provide other audit services. We're liaison with external auditors. Not all of them, certainly all of the state audit activities, audits and investigations, but a lot of the other auditors that come in, federal and state. So that takes up a big bulk of our time in the last several years because we had a lot of activity. That's slowing down. We're not having as many external auditors coming to knock on WSU doors, so we can focus our attention somewhere else. That usually speaks to improvement in controls improvement in audit reports, not as many findings and reasons for external auditors to come in and take a look at how we're managing funds that are awarded to the university or entrusted with the university. So not as much in the liaison activity from here going forward until something comes up. Other audit services are investigations in fraud, waste, and abuse. And we have some time frames in the year that are busier than other times. And I've given some of my theory on that, on why we have peak periods. But we are starting to close out a lot of those cases and able to move off into the other audit services, like I said, in audits. Advisories is the graph I presented for years. When I came on board here many, many years ago, I inherited the role of ethics advisor, which is a little bit different than providing audit assurance. Ethics advising is working with the individuals and making sure that our employees are informed with information from the state ethics law, which can be pretty strict in the state of Washington. And in fiscal year 21, there was a shift. The advisor role went under compliance. This is showing the level, the volume of our advisory services. It's still about 20% of our total time in answering questions from management or folks that call in. It's not all tips. A lot of our advisories are questions on best practices, on how to interpret a policy, maybe a change in a program, what the best way, kind of brainstorming. And so those services are what I've always felt we can provide the most value because it's more immediate to management, and it's not a full audit. It's just usually research and providing that feedback. But over the years, we had as many questions come in that were ethics in nature as control. And since the ethics advisor has come on and moved over into compliance, the number of questions that come in directly to our office about ethics have obviously gone way down. Many more questions in the control and programmatic area, which is a good thing. The ethics advisor is very well equipped to address those questions from individuals on how best to manage the state and the university ethics policy. And it leaves us to spend more of our time on controls and ensuring that we have good processes in place. So I just wanted to be able to demonstrate that we still work in partnership with the ethics advisor and the compliance office quite a bit whenever it's needed. With that, I will take any questions.
Any questions?
All right, thank you.
Heather. Our next information item, the restatement and renegotiation of the commercialization contract for Cosmic Crisp, will be presented by Executive Vice President for Finance and Administration and CFO Leslie Brunelli, Cheryl Kemerzal, College of Agriculture, Human and Natural Resource Sciences, Senior Associate Dean, Scott Hulbert, Director of Innovation and Commercialization for Connors.
Apparently.
They're all helping you.
I hope there are some folks on the screen, are there? Nope, they're all gone. Okay, well, I'm confident that everyone knows more about apples than I do. This item is intended to be just an information item to let you know that this negotiation is underway right now. It's not ready yet. It's likely to be completed sometime this summer before you meet again in September. And what we're alerting you to is that we may use the time critical approval authority because this will exceed the president's designated authority and mine. And other than that, I don't know any of the details, nor do they really want to share the detail at this point because it is still an active negotiation.
Can I just clarify? Sure. Will this be brought back to the board?
If it's completed before the September meeting, we would not bring it back to you. We have authority to do a time critical approval, but the dollar amount will exceed the designation that both Kirk and I have.
So it'll just be a heads up.
Yeah, you would be informed before he could sign off on it. And that is the sum of what I know about apples.
But they're really good apples.
Tasty. They are great apples.
All right. So for the following information item, Leslie will be joined by Senior Associate Vice President and Deputy CFO Matt Skinner and Assistant Vice President for Business and Planning Chris Jones to present the fiscal year 2024 financial performance update.
Thank you. You didn't leave me hanging. I know, I thought there'd be more people here for the other. Right, Tyler, our slides are ready to go. This is the second time that we're bringing forward to you an in-year, in-flight financial update. And we think it's important to do that before we talk about next year's budget development, though these presentations will align quite nicely. This information is not on the quarter, though. We'd love to be able to say this is quarterly. This is through March 31. Unfortunately, March 31 was just a few days ago, and we're still in the process of closing out the month of March. So the information that you have today is through February the 29th. Which is 2/3 of the way through the fiscal year. And this is an evolution. We will get better at providing this information. My hope is to have this available as a monthly dashboard so that we can see this in flight as we're going through the year and use it to be predictive for the next year. You've seen this many times before. This is our full $1.2 billion budget. We really need to update this. It's closer to 1.3 than it is to 1.2, but this is the allocation of our resources where they come in. And you've seen this before as well, our core funds budget, which is the part that is allocable, that is not related to grants, it's not related to auxiliary enterprises or our gifts that come in the door. The majority of our funds, of course, come from our state appropriations and our tuition and fees. And you can see how that comes in. What has changed from this slide since we showed it to you in the month of March is we are showing at the bottom there the supplemental appropriations, those dollars that were approved in the short session of the legislature. One thing that I wanted to point out, which is unusual considering that we did go through a budget cut for fiscal 24, is that our budget is actually larger than it was in the prior year. And the reason for that is we did receive some new state dollars. And you can see that allocation here, some state appropriations in general, primarily that's for our salaries. Unfortunately, though, the legislature is providing about 55% of the need of what we need for salaries and fringe benefits. So we are having to make that up either from our tuition or in a year like this year, we had to reduce our budget so that we were able to cover that. We also received some dedicated supplemental appropriations and provisos. Those are specific dollars for specific things. Think about the Climate Commitment Act dollars that came in for INEF. Those are specific dollars that we spend on that. So they're reflected here. So the budget did go up, but that doesn't mean that it increased our ability to cover our base operations. And that's why you see that we had our 6% reduction for primarily the Pullman campus, but affecting the other campuses as well. Our budget, I will point out as we get into the next slides, for our indirect cost recoveries, our F&A allocations. You heard Mike Walcott say that we were up in our grant awards, and Matt will show you that in a moment. We were conservative in our budget, and we had a lower number for that. We also had a lower number for our interest, because we thought for sure that the Fed was going to start lowering interest rates, and that has not happened. So we're going to actually exceed our budget for that. But our budget is up slightly year over year. Here you can see the budget compared to last year's budget at this time and where we have expended those dollars to date. We have expended approximately $16 million more in our core funds. That's a 4% increase. If you can recall from the prior slide, the budget's up about 2%, but right now our expenditures are up 4%. So that's a pretty clear indicator that we are using some of our fund balances. The good news is that we have those. They are scattered around the university, and we'll talk about those a little bit more in a moment. But we do know that our units are using some of those reserves that are available. Quickly here, the gross tuition and fees, you've seen this before, and this is based on our projection where we'll be at the end of the year. In the yellow, what I have done is showed you the change in that tuition from our high point. We were at 273 million, and we have lost about 24 million in dollars in tuition over time. Now, understand that that tuition includes our tuition increases that have occurred in each of these years. We are not keeping pace with inflation, and this is where our challenge has been, is that as our enrollment drops, that is pulling down our ability to service the mission. I won't spend a lot of time here. You've actually seen this slide before. We showed you this in January. It's the fall transition, that loss of 5,000 students. The same is now true of the spring term. You can see it's the same projection. And we added this slide in so that you could see the fall to spring conversion, because it's important to know how many students are here in the fall or still here in the spring. Some of that is attrition. Some students do leave us from term to term, but some students also graduate, which is a great thing. So there is always a difference. We do receive some new students who come in for the first time in the fall, in the spring, but that change from term to term is really important. You can see that's something that we need to work on as far as our student successes, to make sure that our students who are here in the fall, if they are to continue, that they have every opportunity to do so, and maybe where we need to direct some of our resources. The little tiny gold bar at the bottom there, which you don't see for this year, that's summer. Summer's pretty consistent year over year. We don't have a huge summer program, but those are important dollars, particularly for our academic units. They come into the academic units not as core funds. They are designated funds for the units, so they are available to the units to expend. The units have to be very careful, though, as they offer courses, and Regent McDonald can tell you about this. They want to be clear that that they are having enough students in those courses to actually run that class, because those are not on load.
It seems to me that the fall spring differential is reasonably consistent.
It's widening.
It is widening.
Yeah. You want that number to be as high as possible, and it's getting a bigger widening. Now, some of that, again, we do have students who graduate in December, which is great. They are either on the 3.5-year plan, or maybe they're on the 5.5-year plan. So, but anyway, they have completed. But we do have students who don't retain from the fall term to the spring term. Do you have anything you want to add to that, Elizabeth?
You know, what I would say is, I don't have our first year retention rates right here in front of me, but they're pretty consistent. So I do think a lot of this is the graduation of the two largest classes in our history, which is the 2018 and 2019 incoming classes were the largest incoming classes in our history. So I think, as Leslie said, there's some graduation in there in 23 and 24. And so, but, you know, first year retention is pretty consistent, but it's something for the sophomores, juniors, seniors. Those are where the retention, I think some added resources to make sure we're retaining would be key.
So I just want to add something, because this is top of mind, right? So enrollment feeds everything. And I'll never say that math is my strong suit, but I'm just doing just some quick numbers, and we're talking about a couple hundred people, which I always think in terms of, you know, how can we meet our financial goals, and how do we engage with people? And so, you know, we're looking at between 2022 and 2023, the fall numbers 288 and spring 239. And so I would just challenge us. My math is wrong.
Oh, no, keep going.
Okay.
Keep going.
When I subtract 3,600, well, oh, I see what I did. Okay, I see what I did. That's graduate students. Well, let's talk about graduate students.
Yeah,
So
graduate
my point
students,
is,
yeah, we talk mostly about our undergrads. So that's the very large crimson bar across the bottom, but the darker bar is our grad students. And then the lighter gray bar is the professional students, primarily our med students and pharmacy students.
which there still is, you know, we're talking about hundreds.
Yeah.
We're not talking about thousands in terms of magnitude. What I would challenge all of us to think about is, it's one student at a time, but how many do we all need to be focused on? And so even in my world, where I'm looking at a 17-year-old and a whole, you know, group of 17-year-olds that are choosing and selecting their colleges, you know, that is to me where I feel like it's pretty empowering to know we need 200 students on the Vancouver campus. We need 300 students on the Tri-Cities campus, you know, where we need to be able to help to look people to people. Who are we trying to reach? And how do we get really clear about what that enrollment strategy is? That's not what you're trying to present. But as I look at these and I hear and I see 22% difference between 2020 and 2024 and 19% difference in fall, that feels overwhelming. It feels difficult to turn the ship. We are turning the ship. We have done that. And can we all be thinking about, it's a couple hundred here, it's a couple hundred there, or it's 1,000 that we're trying to achieve. So I know that's something that President Schultz and I have talked about is, can we get finite about what does that look like to meet our budget as we look at next year? How many students are we needing to recruit each campus?
Not to echo, but I really, you said what was in my head just now. So to continue to push and how students can also elevate and show their message of, this is why I stay at WSU, or this is why I continue my journey versus moving somewhere else, or moving to, you know, to continue to work with that partnership and see how even students can share their stories and say, this is why I'm a WSU student, this is why I'm prideful, and this is why I've stayed here. And I also work at high school, so I like to tell my students, you should go to WSU, you should go to WSU. So just want to throw that out there.
We appreciate that. And, move forward here to our sponsored grant revenue, and Matt's going to take it away from here.
Thanks, Leslie. So This is an example, as Leslie mentioned, we're starting to introduce some of these key metrics that we're beginning to track and looking forward to feedback also from the board on how we can define these metrics, both for the board perspective and as we work with leadership. So this looks at our core sponsored federal and state grants, kind of that core activity that's happening. The good news here year over year is we're trending above last year, which was a really strong year for fiscal year 23, about $4 million over through February. And then also on this slide, we look closely at that ratio between our F&A revenue, the indirect cost recoveries that we receive as a university compared to the total. We're trending at about the same percentage of recovery on F&A revenue as we are for total sponsored grant revenue.
And you asked this morning how you can support, Mike Walcott can support additional research on the campus. These additional F&A dollars will help do that. And so his office and our office are working together with the provost to decide how can we push some of this F&A out to further support research to generate even more research dollars.
And to that end, this slide supports what Leslie is looking at. So for fiscal year 24, our budget target for F&A revenue is about $40.5 million. We're pacing above that level, above where we were last year through February, and we feel like we'll be on track to exceed that, just slightly that target in the budget. So that is positive progress there. Interesting, we looked this up before it came about 2,600 grants contributed to that 27 million in F&A so far this year, which was kind of an interesting view.
This is all state and federal money.
Yeah, and local grants.
It's not private. It's not foundation.
Right. The last component of that core funds budget that we track closely is our interest revenue and our administrative fees. Our budget target for that for the year was $23.7 million. And as Leslie mentioned earlier, we're pacing really strong against that. Through 2/3 of the year, we're almost to our budgeted plan level. We've been beneficiaries of some unique market rates and short-term rates, which we don't believe will hold long-term, but our Treasury Services Group has done a great job of really leveraging our cash into those funds to get as much interest revenue as we can. So we do think we'll finish this year a little bit higher, closer to how we finished FY23.
And we're not building the interest rate change into the base budget because rates will come down, as will the amount of cash that we have in the bank. So we can't build that in as a recurring budget item, but the dollars are available for one-time use. And you'll see in our budget presentation where we do have some one-time need. All right, the next slide that we have shows you where our core expenditures have been this year compared to the prior year. In each category, we are up over the prior. And Chris will talk to you about those changes.
Sure. Yeah, we presented the same slide back in January, except that was for November year-to-date data. Seeing a similar trend as of February year-to-date, where expenses are up in almost all the expenditure categories. Our team continues to dive into the details behind this, looking at what's driving up various costs. For example, salaries and wages. We do know there were a couple of across the board increases this year for faculty, staff, and civil service employees. We want to see what else is going on there with regards to hiring, potentially hiring faculty and staff at higher salaries, maybe positions that were unfilled during COVID, and now we're filling more positions. We also see, variances in our utilities. That's actually down. Last year was historically high with high cost of natural gas. Our facilities team is great at working on controlling those costs. And despite a major gas pipeline rupture back in November, pretty cold January in Pullman, we are still tracking lower than last year. But again, last year was very high as far as utilities costs went. Goods and services are up. We know inflation plays a part in this. I think year-over-year inflation was about 3.2%. So there are other things we're looking at there. Obviously, as Leslie showed earlier, we have more budget, so naturally there might be more spending, but we continue to ask why and look at this at a unit level as well.
Any questions about that before we move on? Okay. Matt will talk to us a little bit more about salaries and wages, and you'll see where we're starting to align this with the work that Teresa and Jennifer talked about in the earlier presentation.
Yeah, and this is our first view today of that other goal, which is to start looking across all funds, all units of the university. So as we think about how we use our resources. This is one great indicator. Personnel is a large use for the university. Our single largest use of resources is for employees and personnel. So some trends here year to date that are of interest here that we look at the charts. Our faculty salary expense is up about 9% year over year. That's driven by a 2.5% mass salary increase that was put in place for this year and about a 1% change in faculty FTE across the system on all funds. Our administrative professional employees expense for salary is up 9% over the last year. They also received the 2.5% salary increase across the board. And there's about a 6% increase in FTE in that category versus last year. And the final one we'd highlight is actually our largest area of salary increases in the classified employee area. That's driven by a 4% salary increase that was given to classified employees for this fiscal year and a 6% increase in FTE. Our next level below this that we're excited to begin being able to slice and dice on is looking down at each unit, college campus unit, to see what those trends are. Also being able to break that apart by funds, so we can see what's happening in the sponsored grant area, what's happening on core funds, what's happening in our auxiliary enterprises.
That the salaries are a major area of continued concern. When you were looking at last year's budget and thinking about this next year's budget, how does salary compression and changes in the market impact how you budget, or how this budget was prepared?
Well, our increases come largely from the state. We're not able to offer over and above what the state is providing to us. And again, they only provide 55% of what we need overall for all of our budget picture. So we had a 4% increase at the classified level. We had a 2.5% increase for our faculty and AP, which was effective on October the 1st. This coming year, we already know that the classified is 3%, which will be effective July 1, but we have not determined yet what the faculty and AP amount will be, because that's as part of this budget development process.
So when, let's say that we're both working together, President Schultz goes to get another offer, comes back, we have a similar job, we want to keep him, and so was there any allocation even in this last budget around how you try, right? My 4% might not meet, he just got a huge, maybe offer someplace else. So
that is not a central item that we have budgeted. That is handled at the unit level.
Okay, great.
Do you want to speak to how the academic units handle that for the most part?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for faculty in any event, all of those retention offers come through the provost office, and really what we're ensuring that the colleges, schools and colleges are and the campuses are paying for the salary, but the provost office role is to make sure that there's equity. Because you can imagine, and having been a dean myself, sometimes the squeaky wheels get the best retention offers, and then that creates inequity in the unit because someone else didn't go out and get a retention offer, right? So in the provost office, we've been really assiduous for the past 4 years to make sure that we're looking at faculty salaries by rank, by years in rank, asking the college for a rationale, as well as whether they can cover the salary themselves within their existing budget. And then also asking the question, what else would it take to retain? Because sometimes it isn't salary, it's course load, it's research support, it's office location, there could be lots of reasons. And so really encouraging deeper conversations about why someone was willing to apply for something else and what it is we can do to retain them. So that's how we handle it with salary. With staff, those don't come through the provost office, but handled largely the same way.
Leslie, is there any disparity on this top line, faculty line, between tenure/tenure track faculty and clinical faculty?
I don't know that we have that broken out yet at that level. Yeah, we're not at the point of having that broken out yet. That's the next step of this.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. All right. I've talked about the use of our fund balances. Some of our units refer to those as reserves. I prefer the fund balances. We are monitoring and watching that very closely at the university level, because the university's working capital is those fund balances. And if you think about the volume, the size of this institution, nearly 1.3 billion, 120 days of cash on hand is $400 million at any given time. And that's not to say that those dollars can never be utilized, but that is a lot to have available at any given time. If you think about just the personnel side of our operation, we expend $55 million in salaries alone every month. And so we have to be able to manage through that. I mean, imagine if another COVID type situation came before us and we didn't have the resources to manage through that. And certainly this university was not in a place where it had cash reserves built up in 2016 and 2017 before the financial recovery went through. So our units are fortunate. They do have some cash available, but we do have to be very careful about the use of that, because using those dollars in a recurring way with the expectation that they will be replaced at some point is a fallacy, and that will dig us into a structural budget deficit. So we are monitoring and we're asking our units to tell us if you have to use them, how are you using them, to be careful that we're not going to spend ourselves into a challenge. In the budget development process, we asked our units to tell us, where do you think you're going to end the year? And so we really haven't done that kind of forecasting previously, but where do you think you'll end? Units told us in the core funds that they expect to use about $10 million in core funds fund balance. I'll say the number's probably a little bit north of that, but we'll see how it plays out. We have that. Some of our units don't, though. Some of our units are building deficits at this point. And so we are implementing ways, just like we did with athletics last year, of how to get them out of that deficit going into the future. We have some units that have structural budget deficits. And what I mean by that is they are expending in a recurring way dollars that they do not have in a recurring way. And that's, we have to address that quickly, because that's how the university becomes even more challenged. I have on here possible future changes with the foundation. And that's something that we have been talking about with the foundation and with the foundation board, about possibly changing the distribution, possibly changing how the dollars that have already been pushed into the university that have not yet been spent could come back into the foundation to earn greater dollars, but that will have an impact on our cash. And so we have to measure that with how we think we're going to end the year. And as our forecasting gets better, we'll be able to say, yes, that's a great idea. Both of those ideas coming from the foundation are great. They should be doing that to support the campaign, but we have to make sure that it does not impact the university's cash position. And then finally, we need to work on a policy for how units have these dollars and what they can and cannot do with them. It's great that they have them. I don't want to ever be in a situation like the federal government is, where everybody spends down their dollars at the last minute because they can. We don't want to do that. That's destabilizing, but we want to make it an efficient and effective way to manage our working capital and make sure that we are always having the appropriate amount of cash available in the bank.
Question, since Workday has been implemented, has there been a trend in a good direction on deficit balances and so forth? Because one of the concerns raised about the old system prior to Workday was that people had trouble really tracking in real time their budgets. So I'm wondering if that has been a plus.
Sure. Well,
But the expressions I'm not.
Yeah, well, you're seeing us smile back and forth, see if we're both smiling about the same thing. And albeit my candid opinion is, I think there was an adoption period, right? So when you first went live with the system, I think we actually saw a dip. When we talked about that earlier from a change perspective, we talked about that valley of despair, if you remember that conversation. So we had this little dip in ability to track. I think that now people are finding it easier to see activities, and that they can go from a budget and within a couple clicks actually see a detailed invoice for what they spent the money on, all in one system, is remarkable transparency and visibility. I would add, though, as far as deficit spending and pockets of need to address deficit spending, the system needs accountability and responsibility to go with that. And I think that's what Leslie's talked about, is for these areas that are in deficit or have accounts in deficit, getting them on a very transparent quarterly check-in plan for fiscal year 25. So we're finding out how they're doing. Are they on pace? Are they meeting their budget goals? That's going to be more important than the system and helping address any areas of deficit.
And we've talked a lot, Matt has coined a phrase, accounting hygiene. So we're looking at units right now at the very highest level when everything rolls up to one thing. But if you blow that apart and start looking at discrete accounts within it, there's positives and negatives everywhere. And most units have that. But we have not trained or coached folks to clear deficits at the end of the year. We're just now doing it with all of our grants and getting those brought back to zero. We need to do the same thing with all of our other funds. That's just not been, that's not even a workday thing. That's a pre to workday too. We just have not done that kind of cleanup on an annual basis.
So remind me of that 1.3 billion, what is salary and benefits represent?
It's about 75% of the total. It's more of the core funds. Most of what we do is people. The last thing I'll share is the progress in reporting. You can see it evidenced here, and we're starting to work on reports that we will do on a monthly basis with our units going into next year. We are considering what elements need to be on a dashboard that we can identify, that we can share with you and with the university's leadership. We are continuing our push towards having quarterly financial statements available, not accrued, not completely audited, just something that's available for us to see changes year over year and be able to get ahead of that before we get to the reporting cycle. We're getting ready to sit down with both Moody's and S&P to do a small bond refunding, and there's going to be an expectation. They'll ask us, where do you think you'll be at the end of the year? We need to be able to say, this is where we think we're going to be at the end of the year, despite the fact we won't have done the accruals yet, and we will work on muscle around that. And then finally, of course, the goal of this is to be able to use the current year info to predict next year and be able to inform the budget development process. In the back of this, I don't want to belabor this, but we had shared in the January meeting some of the credit hour detail by college. We have included that again. You have fall, but we've also added spring and summer there, so you can see that just for information. Happy to answer any questions you might have about that.
Any questions? Just a highlight for 2024. Really appreciate all the continuous improvement that has been installed and continues to be. Even before our awesome finance team showed up, the comments about Workday this morning were really, positive. We're on the learning curve. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
I think Matt's team has done a really good job of focusing on the grant side of the house and has made some measurable improvements there.
Cool. So we're going to shift to 2025, and you're all going to stay up there and talk about 2025.
There we are. Okay, so we're in our fiscal 25 budget development process, as we shared with you at our last meeting. Waiting for, oh,
You're good. Keep going.
okay. Just when my slides come up, I will. There we go. All right, you've seen this just a moment ago, our $640 million core funds budget, and that's what this slide deck is about. We are talking about the core funds, the funds that are allocable to us. The other funds, of course, are the grant activity, the auxiliary enterprise activity, the gift activity. And this does not include that. But I wanted to start talking about how we're thinking of the budget and how we will present this in a budget document and to the campus moving forward. Here's the same core funds budget, but now we're showing it more at a high level by division. What's important here is the allocation, and we have the percentage on this. I don't have it on the future slides here, but you can see our colleges, all of our 10 academic units make up just over half of that budget. Then you can see the campuses. This is the challenge in this presentation because Vancouver and Tri-Cities particularly, everything is all together for them. So their academic costs, their administrative costs is all together. So we will have to figure out how to do this a little bit better moving forward. But right now we think the presentation of the colleges and the campuses, including all of their activity, works until we explode it just a little bit farther. Then you see our academic support. It's our provost units. And I'm going to show you these in detail in a moment. The administrations are mostly at the presidential level units. And then my operation, finance and operations is the piece at the top there that's just over 20% of the budget. We look at the colleges a little bit more in detail, and I apologize, this does not have the percentages beside each of those, but you can see the relative size of each of the budgets for the colleges. Comparatively, the largest is Connors by far. Then we have Arts and Sciences, which is the largest credit hour producer on campus. Then Vet Med, then our College of Medicine here in Spokane, and then our College of Engineering. And then the other ones are smaller than that. But I think it's important to see them relative to each other. We'll add the percentages next time so that it's a little bit more meaningful. What we'll eventually have is the ability to look at this for you, the colleges, their budgets, the relative size percentage, but also their FTE, because I think that's going to be an important metric to add to that as well. The campuses, again, with the challenge that Vancouver and Tri-Cities particularly have, because again, this is their entire operation pushed here together. Spokane a little bit different because the colleges of medicine, pharmacy, and nursing were on that previous slide, but that's the administrative side of the Spokane campus. The global campus, very different because it doesn't have its academic units. Those are drawing off of the colleges. Pullman here also a little bit unusual because this is the Pullman Chancellor's Office operation and the portion of student affairs that is not on other funds. So this is just a small portion of the student affairs budget. Doesn't include housing and dining. That's not core, but that's just showing you the relative breakdown of the campuses. The academic support units are those that report through the provost, including the provost's office, research, the libraries, the grad school, international programs, and enrollment management. Our administrative split, which is the offices under the president's responsibility, and his the allocation of the presidential units includes not just the operation of his office, but it's also the Board of Regents is inside there. The AG's office, internal audit, community engagement, and the work that Zoe Heigl-Strong leads for tribal relations is inside that wedge. And you see EAGER, government relations, university development. This is the portion of Mike Connell's operation that is core funded, not his piece that is entirely with the foundation, but the piece that we provide the core funds for. Marketing and communications under Phil Weiler, and then Office of Strategy, Planning and Analysis under Chris Hoyt. Then you'll see my operation, finance and operations, and there's a very large wedge there. And before you get very excited that that big piece is unallocated, it is not. But the central pool there is the general fund for the university, and it is where the utilities for the Pullman campus run through. It also includes our large contracts for Pullman with Whitman County, with the fire department, with the airport. A lot of our institutional dues run through there. A portion of our university benefits runs through that. The only piece that is unallocated is the F&A that comes in from the grants that has not yet gone out to any of the units. So we're holding that as an unallocated piece. The facility operation is largely Pullman, but it is capital planning for the entire system. So all of the use of MCI and MCR dollars that Olivia Yang's unit pushes out runs through her operation. You see human resources. You've heard from Teresa and her group today. Information technology under Tony Offam. That's the piece that is the centralized IT. There's lots of IT that's expended around campus that is not part of the central operation. Business and financial services is Matt, and that's Matt's operation for the controller's office, purchasing, payroll, the bursar's office, real estate, sponsored programs, the backside of the grant activity. Public safety and business operations is one that will likely move into Pullman because it is the police. It's the golf course. It's Beasley Auditorium. It's the Brailsford Visitor Center, and it's also transportation and parking and non-core funds, but those are very specifically Pullman items, which eventually will move over to the Pullman Chancellor's office. It does also include right now environmental health and safety, which may or may not be something that we shift to Pullman because that is a system-wide function. And then the last piece is my office there, which includes me. It also includes the budget office, and it includes enterprise risk and compliance. You heard from Cheryl this morning. That's the last piece of the wedge. So this presentation of the budget at this discrete level is how we'd like to do this moving forward so that you can see where each of the dollars are. And the reason I wanted to break this down and show it to you this way, because these are the units that came before us and did their budget presentations just last month. And so during the month of March, from the 18th to the 29th, we held 44 unit meetings over 22 hours. And included in that, of course, was the president and the provost. Daryl DeWald is the EVP for health sciences. We invited Judy McDonald to be there, and then Matt and Chris helped staff it as well. I put these folks on the spot. They know this is coming, but I'd love for them to just speak briefly about what your impressions were from that round of budget hearings. I'm gonna come to you last. Judy, do you mind starting?
Sure. For me, this was an amazing learning opportunity. It cleared up some myths I had about how money was spent. It also made me appreciate how complicated it is to understand how we're spending our dollars, because there are IT and dean's budgets, there's IT and department budgets, there's IT and a centralized budget, there's IT and campus budgets. And sometimes if we increase spending or decrease spending one place, it gets picked up or dropped the other place. And so that makes some of it really complicated. So if we decrease something centrally, it may mean that the units have to pick it up because they still need the service. I also started to appreciate a lot more most of the time you would say, let's centralize and have economies of scale. But then in the listing sessions, we also heard some of, in our unit, we need this. And the central group that's doing this aren't necessarily in the position or have the understanding to deliver it. So it made me appreciate what a incredibly complicated organization we are, that the push and pull between centralized and non-centralized is non-trivial to sort out. And I feel like I learned a lot of things this time round that I hope will contribute to us building a better framework going forward. Like, this was our learning framework, and I think we're doing a pretty good job for a first time attempt. And then it's going to inform sort of how we do better decision making going forward. I think Leslie and Matt and Chris have done a phenomenal job of taking some of this stuff and being able to present it, and in a way that somebody like me, naively coming in here knowing very little about budgeting, can get my head around it and start to understand it. So I really appreciate the team. I think what we're doing is a really important exercise. I think it's going to inform things in the future where we can just do everything a lot better, and that's going to help us with our financial situation. So I really appreciate, Leslie, that you put this together. Appreciate being included, because I feel like I'm drinking from the fire hose, but it's pretty thirsty. I think a lot of us are thirsty.
Elizabeth, do you mind?
No, not at all. I mean, I've been at Washington State University for 4 years now, and, I was very skeptical when Leslie suggested we have half-hour meetings with 44 units. How could you possibly learn enough? Not that it was too much, but in some ways, would that be enough? And I think because it forced all units, including ones that I oversee, to distill their mission, their purpose, the core, what are the core needs, and what impacts, both what they want to do in the future, but what the impacts of reductions would be. I learned more about some units than I had learned in the past 4 years, and at a very high level. And while Regent McDonald kept asking naive questions, they were questions all of us had. And I banned her from saying naive anymore, because it really got us to the essence of what each of those units does. And a number of them said that it was beneficial to them to dive that deep. We have interim deans, for example, in that group, and interim vice presidents who had to really quickly dive into the crux of their budget, and not just their budget, but how they're funding their mission. That's the key thing. And so it was very beneficial, and I agree that it'll inform the process going forward.
Daryl.
So I guess I would just add, maybe for the benefit of the Regents, I think you're aware that this is, for my time here, the first time we haven't done an across the board cut. Where Leslie established a process where we did invite input, we listened, we understood, and people were really deliberate and clear, not only about the cuts they could take, but also what they would like to see invested in. So doing this in a way where it starts us on the pathway of kind of more prioritization. And I just thought it was very beneficial. So this process for me is a step forward from what we've done in the past.
I thought it's been extremely helpful. We still have the hard decisions to make ahead of us, but I think that the only thing I would add to my colleagues is that several unit leaders presented significant opportunities that they would say, you know, this isn't in our core mission of what we're doing. It's been an add-on in our particular unit. And instead of nibbling around the edges around the budget, we would prefer to eliminate this or close it or something like that. And it was good to see those because you thought a budget exercise probably isn't the right time to be hearing that from a strategic point of view. But I think there's several things that I appreciate leaders putting forward. And the other thing, and Daryl mentioned this, I thought leaders were really honest and upfront. There were several units that came in and said, you know, we can't absorb, cuts at a certain level that mean we can't do as much, but our core operations are still going to be intact. And that's hard to go through a budget review group and be that honest. And we really do appreciate people doing that. And you don't go, well, this is an easy one because they said they could do it at an effect inch. It's that I think people are really upfront and honest and open about the impacts it would have. So now what we got to do is take what is the must-haves, what are the nice-to-haves, and everything will be a must-have, but we're going to have to narrow that down to keep this as modest as possible, but fund the things that are important to us. So.
And so everyone's mentioned that, the hard work is the work ahead. And I showed you this slide at the March meeting. You can see the new dollars that will be available from the tuition increase, yet we are still challenged with the persistent enrollment decline. So we'll have about 2.5 million available. Our state funding ended up being $2 million for the graduate student need. The need on the core funds is 4.33 million. They chose to fund 2 million of that in a non-recurring way, which means that we have to be back for the next biennium asking for that to be fully funded. That leaves us with about 4.5 million available. But down below, you see where the work is. When we totaled up all the requests from the units, we had over $43 million in recurring requests. And you can see over to the side, I've added the non-recurring requests. So that's dollars that were just one time in nature. Now, that number is a little bit skewed because our College of Nursing asked for the simulation work that they want to undertake for the sim lab for nursing there. That is a state request that we are going to make. So you can pull 28 million out of that. It's included in that 31. Down below that, you see what the reduction parameters were. We asked our units to be prepared to talk to us about 1%, 3%, and 5% reductions. It may be that a unit has 2. It may be that a unit has 3. It could be any number in there. There are going to be units that don't have any, I have a feeling, but that's what those dollars will generate. So the hard part now is going through the requests, going through the impact of the cuts and having that meet. And so over the next weekend, the folks that just spoke to you have homework. During this weekend, they have to go through all of those requests and start prioritizing them. We're using this framework, these guiding principles to lead the work. This was actually written originally by our Executive Budget Council as the work with Huron and the budget model was underway. I have added one item in there. It's aligning the university's financial position with the future strategic plan, with our capital campaign, and with our institutional risk. You heard Cheryl talk this morning about the top risks. If we're not aware of those issues as we're making these budget allocations, we're missing something. They have to be together. The same with thinking about how we're going to walk into a new capital campaign and say, where are our priorities? So we're at the point now where all that has to converge, and we have the opportunity to do that because we're making this differential budget allocation decision. And I'm a process person and I love a good 2x2. So this is sort of how we're doing the homework, is we're asking everyone to sort of score these. How strategically important is this activity compared to everything else on the page? Because what we've heard before without a defined budget development process is every new thing sounds fabulous when it's the only thing that's being talked about. But when you have to look at everything holistically, we have to start to put some values on this. Is it the most strategically important? Does it have to be funded in the next year? There are going to be some things in that 2 column there that's less strategically important, but still need funding. I mean, we have to fund the utility increase. It's not really strategy, but we have to keep the lights on. So that'll be in there. But this will be subjective for each of us. And then we're going to be together to make the final allocations, and it will be iterative. I mean, I have no doubt that over the weekend, folks will be doing this work and do their reductions and do their allocations where they need them, and there's going to be a miss. They're not going to align. It's going to take multiple times to get this back in line and multiple discussions. Hopefully, we will get this wrapped up by the end of the month. I'm not sure that we can make that target though, but it would be soon after if it's not by the end of April. We do want to prepare a budget document. I think that's very important for this university to provide some transparency. Frankly, the slides that I showed you with the pie charts at the division level, our campus doesn't know that and needs to be able to have access to that information. And especially in a year where we're doing differential reductions, we have to be clear on why. And then, of course, we would be back to talk with you at the retreat in June about how this process unwound and start thinking about how we'll be planning fiscal 26.
Any questions? Really? Okay.
It's pretty dense material there.
Okay.
I just think it sounds like a great process, and it was, very fairly done, and it just asked some really thought-provoking questions, and I'm pleased to hear that there have been some sort of that people used really took it seriously and went down deep in to look where there are opportunities for change. And I think that that's really promising. I'm looking forward to hearing how it all comes out in June.
Thank you.
The hard part too is in any organization is the prioritization of the list, right? And the list is dynamic and changes by the day and then by the quarter, and it's just that ongoing challenge all the time. So
yes,
good luck.
Thank you.
One more thing, I think that one of the biggest challenges we're going to have is we have several units that have structural budget deficits that are significant. And it's only 4 or 5, which is good. It's not 25 or 30, but those are going to be where the lion's share of the tough decisions have to be made. And we know it involves people and things like that. And some of it will take multiple years to get where we need to go. But I think what Leslie and Matt and Chris have done is by putting some of these accountability things in place and doing that, it's not just telling somebody you got to do it and hope that it happens a year later. It's making sure that we're tracking with leaders and sitting down on a regular basis and saying, is what you said you were going to do, are you doing it? And are we helping each other figure out how to get there? So I think it's not just what things are cool and new, it's dealing with some units that, for lots of reasons have gotten where they are. And now we got to help them get back out of that. So
I would just say, I think the lack of comments or feedback, and in particular, you started this finance meeting with a comment from the public. There's so much information, and I think we recognize and understand our role, and it will be helpful to understand moving forward how the 25 budget is going to be set up and how we can help. But the bottom line is we have got to increase enrollment, right? So revenue, and in my world of private industry, and there are very, very tough decisions that have to be made. To your point, Regent Dickinson, around prioritization, some of that prioritization is going to have to be saying no. And I think that that's the role of the board, is to be in alignment with our leadership as we get ready to have to do a very difficult review of our programs. We cannot sustain where we are. And the idea that we have to ask through 44 sessions, 135%, that's not going to get us where we need to be. And so I just, it's difficult to even engage in how to ask good questions that don't lead to further depths of data. And the bottom line is that there are hard decisions facing this university, and we intend to be part of helping to prioritize and support those decisions and the process to get there.
Well, the no is not just even the hard part, it's the no more on things that perhaps exist and will not continue. Because I think that is part of your prioritization process, right? But the no more or continuing, it's one thing to say no to something new, it's another thing to say no more to something toxicity. So that gets really tough. But there is no way out of what we just looked at without doing that.
It's a challenged budget model, and it's not a Washington State issue. It's a higher ed issue for all of higher ed, because your sources of funding are the state, which is challenged as well, and students, and you have an affordability and an amount at which you cannot charge any longer. Plus, there's a question of whether higher ed is worth it, however you couch that. So it's just a challenged budget model right now.
Yeah, so I'll just say on the flip side of all of that, there's room for innovation on all fronts. And there are sources and uses, and this whole idea of budget exercises that lifts up into a more strategic level discussion, even at unit levels. I think that's a really cool opportunity to engage and to, come together as a team. So that's just me coming from corporate world of, complex budgets. So I really appreciate everything that you've done, and we're not done here. We're going to shift, if that's okay, for our last information item, fiscal year 2024 athletics financial performance. Leslie will be joined by Assistant Vice President for Business and Finance, Financial Services and Athletics CFO John Harlow, and our interim athletic director, Ann McCoy.
Thank you. And if you don't mind, Regent Ramos, what we'd like to do is move from this information item naturally into the first future action item, though we will ask you to bring that future action item forward. That's fiscal 24 and fiscal 25 for athletics.
Before you get started, this is the first time that we've had Ann as our interim athletic director, before the board. She'll be with us at dinner tonight, so you can ask her all the questions that you want to then around lots of other things. But really appreciate Ann stepping in with Pat's departure, and she's done an exceptional job internally communicating with our coaches, our student athletes, with the staff, getting Cammie's extension done, hiring Coach Riley to coach men's basketball, and securing a conference affiliation for swimming and for baseball for the next 2 years. That's all in the last couple of weeks. So I appreciate all the great work Ann is doing and continues to do. And we want to welcome you to the board. So.
Thank you. No, I really appreciate that. And I also want to express my gratitude to the board for all of the amazing words of encouragement and support and the reach out since embarking on this new role and adventure a little over 3 weeks ago. So it's meant a lot to me, and I really appreciate it, as does our team over in athletics. So we appreciate that. I would also like to say we appreciate the patience and the understanding of the board as we've navigated what I'll just call an unprecedentedly challenging FY24 in this last academic year, but also as we embark on what we're looking at as unprecedented opportunity also as we move forward to fiscal year 25. And so Leslie and her team and John and everyone have just been an amazing support and kind of going through all of this. And it's been a work in progress, I think, as we've really evaluated and done our own assessment of priorities and, funding sources and everything else to get to this point today. So I just want to say again, thanks not only to the board for your patience and understanding, but also to the great team we have working in support of us. So John, I'll turn it over to you.
Well said, Ann. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Good to see you all. Thank you again for the opportunity. Always a pleasure to be here and discuss this with the board. We'll talk through FY24 at a high level. For starters, please feel free to interrupt with comments or questions as we go through. We'll start on the revenue side. We have had some changes in revenue since our March update. For starters, most particularly an uptick in ticket sales. We've improved our ticket sales projections by nearly $500,000 since our last update. It's still not quite close. We don't quite close the gap to where we originally budgeted, but the run that men's and women's basketball went on to close the season helped those get closer. Tremendous effort there. We also had, as was noted earlier, some key departures on our staff and coaching staff, and we'll be receiving some buyout revenue from each of those. We'll be receiving nearly $1 million in that before the end of the fiscal year, which will help tremendously as well. Obviously, ticket sales and buyouts are upticks on the revenue side. Conversely, we have had our annual fund be off pace by nearly $1 million. As a reminder, our annual fund is tied to football season ticket renewals for next season. And those are donations that go specifically to donate to funding student athlete scholarships. We have 2.5 months remaining to try and close that gap. And thanks to Anne's leadership, we have a team that's dedicated to getting as close to closing up that gap as we possibly can. So those are the changes in revenue. To summarize there, projecting a $3.6 million shortfall in revenue for 24. Flipping to the expense side, we have had some increases here as well. For starters, and a part of this is due to the timing of materials, we were projecting a little bit of an additional increase in our overage and compensation. However, that was prior to some of the staff changes we've seen in the last couple of weeks. Implementation of those and the adjustments that have been made in the AD position in men's basketball, we think that that gap will close as we get closer to the fiscal year before June 30. Other area we've seen some scope creep is in our team travel, most particularly in men's and women's basketball, their championship runs. Wonderful to have the success, but it's not free either. So we've seen some increased costs there. And then finally, in our other expense category and some maintenance and custodial work that's been done. And as we settled up our agreements with the Pac-12 for our away football settlements from this past season. Overall, just as a reminder, the board approved a $4 million budget deficit back in September for FY24. We've seen that increase to what we're now projecting to be around $9.4 million to end the fiscal year. However, we're committed to utilizing revenues that will flow through the conference that we'll receive this year to backstop that deficit as to not further increase the internal deficit to the university. Any questions on 24 before rolling to 25?
Maybe just a comment. We do still have an athletic budget oversight committee that meets regularly in between these meetings, and we go deeper into the budget performance. And we had a change in leadership here recently. Dr. Paul Skilton's going to roll off, and he's going to retire from Tri-Cities. And so we want to thank him for his service. And I think Dr. Sheldon's going to step in as part of our athletic oversight budget performance committee. So thank you.
John, you went through that really quick, which is good. I mean, I feel we've all lived here, but I just want to emphasize we should, with those additional conference revenues coming in, finish the year flat so that we don't add, you mentioned that, to the deficit. Almost every year at this meeting, we've walked away going, oh my gosh, that number is a lot bigger than we thought it was. We're going to add to the deficit and so forth. And I think it's really important and critical that working with the conference office, we were able to close that off for this particular year. And I just want to make sure we emphasize that in as positive way as we can. So, and anyway, thank you for your work and keeping us on track and where we are and making sure that we didn't have any big surprises come up where you go, oh my gosh, this wasn't taken into account. And I think we felt last year some of that happened. And thanks for your intervention and leadership and helping us get here.
Thank you. There's been a lot of folks involved with that. I figured I'd spare you of my line by line analysis. I know everyone
Can I
enjoys
just
that.
punctuate that?
Yeah,
though?
I was just going to say, like,
Please do.
Actually, that's what I was going to ask about. Yeah.
Well, I mean, just recall that it was less than a year ago that we all debated here and we fought for WSU. And this is the outcome that we were looking for, to get help so that we could, fight for a future for WSU athletics. And I think, to your point, John, a lot of people were involved. Nathan is here somewhere, but our president Schultz also, along with that fight, a whole big team effort. But this is a pivotal outcome of that. And so I just think we need to punctuate that.
So switching gears to 25, as everyone's aware, obviously departing 10 schools from the Pac-12, conference composition will look very different from next year, which means our revenue packages are going to look very different from next year. However, with that, we think we've put together an achievable and competitive and really conservative revenue budget that will allow us to compete next year. Just at a high level, we believe we're looking at $74 million in revenues next year. These revenues will be comprised of, first and foremost, as typically has been in the past, a conference distribution that would be made up of media rights revenue, NCAA units, CFP money, Rose Bowl money, and other bowl allocations. Beyond the conference distribution, which will be the lion's share of the revenues that we'll see, we also have our typical game-related and auxiliary-related revenues, our ticket sales, parking, concessions, those types of things. We've built our budget around 65 to 70% of what we believe will we'll realize in FY24 in an effort to be conservative. It's worth noting when we closed the renewal period for football season tickets at the beginning of April, we were at 67% renewed. We've obviously not turned anyone away from renewing. So those that trickled in a little bit later, as of yesterday, we were at 73% renewed. We'll go through a reseating process and then open it up for new season ticket holders here in a couple of weeks. But so far, we're trending better than we had predicted. And so we're already better pace than we had built our budget on. So we'll take that as a win. Some of the other additional revenues that were factored in here, just our standard contractual revenue streams, our multimedia rights partner, particularly sponsorships and licensing agreement. We believe that the 74 million in revenue, again, is conservative and even has a potential for additional upside as we work collaboratively with the Pac-12 on some other revenue or some other work streams and revenue streams that we're actively engaged in now. And we'll be able to report on those in a future discussion. Flipping to the expenses, obviously 74 in revenue means we have to get to 74 in expense. And for those that were tracking on the previous, we're projected to land FY24 north of 85 million. So in order to get down to 74 million in expenses, means we need to make a net reduction of over $11 million. This is work that's already underway, and it's involved elimination of one-time expenses that were unique in FY24, restructuring of contracts, both operational and employee contracts, upwards of 12% reductions to team and support unit operational budgets, and then finally reductions in staffing and labor. We've tried to approach these reductions with the student athletes in mind that will allow us to continue to provide the best and most competitive experience as possible, while also being mindful of our resources. However, unfortunately, these reductions, it will impact our teams, our services, and our personnel. However, with the implementation of these strategies, we do believe that we've come up with a $74 million expense budget that will allow us to compete and balance to our bottom line. Any additional comments on 25 questions?
I just, I know that there's always a lot of campus dialogue around how much we spend on athletics. And there'll be some that look and say, man, this is great, it's 74. It just, those are people. We're going to have less people, their neighbors, or people live in Pullman, you know, things like that. I think it's easy to look at the number and say, boy, that sounds great. I just want to remind everybody, you know, this is some really challenging decisions that Ann and her team have to make, and it's never easy. So I just appreciate the hard work that went into getting us to this particular place. But I just want to remind everybody, it's a 10-11% cut. I'd like to remind everybody, athletics would have loved to have a 1, 3, and 5%, you know, cut scenario. So this is substantial, and I just appreciate the hard work that's gone into getting us here.
Any other questions or comments on 2025? So we're going to move this.
Judy
to,
had one.
Judy.
So one of the things I keep hearing in the media is a difference in the turnout to watch women's sports. So we had the volleyball game this summer that had the largest live audience of a women's sports ever. I believe, if I heard correctly, the NCAA women's final had more TV viewership than the men's final. Do we have a strategy for encouraging Coug fans to come out for our women athletes?
We've spent quite a bit of time talking about that, as you might imagine, even before all of these great unprecedented attendance events. I think this past fall with volleyball, we surpassed what we had ever brought in for attendance, had several sellout matches, et cetera. I think the women's basketball attendance has been trending in the right direction, but honestly, with all the success and the engagement they have, not only on campus as students, but also within the community, both the students and staff, I think we're hoping to continue to build upon that. So I know that's been a huge priority for our marketing team. To really talk through that, how do we engage not only the community, but the student community into coming out to watch just amazing competition. And quite frankly, it's something we're looking at in all of our sports. I think if it's a beautiful Friday night for soccer, there's better attendance. If it's not a great, day on Sunday, then not so much, but the product stays the same. So how can we really encourage people that it's a phenomenal product to come see? Regardless of the weather, regardless of the time of year, regardless of the opponent, those sorts of things that, Washington State University athletics and our women's sports do amazing things. And they're, we don't want them to be a well-kept secret, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So we are definitely targeting that going forward as a great way to help just even continue to sell for our student athletes in recruiting as we navigate some of these things. That Washington State University is a community, and being there and competing in front of your community is just something that you don't get everywhere. So that's a huge priority for us.
Thank you.
And you've also had an opportunity to engage with the athletic staff, everybody writ large around the budget challenges and things. Could you share a little bit of what you've done in terms of communication, just broadly?
Sure. Communication's been a huge priority since all of the changes we had a little over 3 weeks ago, and getting our entire staff together, both formally for an all staff where it looked a little more structured. We've done some COOG catch-ups where it's a little more like there's a lot of heavy duty stuff, but it's just a little more informal. Encouraged a lot of conversation and drop-ins. I mean, John and his team have had tremendous numbers of meetings with just drilling down with the budgets and explaining and exploring kind of the possibilities. And to be honest, what the feedback has been is that people kind of knew the elephant was out there. It just is refreshing to be able to talk about it and be part of the solution. And in fact, while we were waiting for our presentation, one of our head coaches texted with an idea of a way that we could generate some revenue that might help save some student or other support positions, which was really, I mean, a really neat and positive thing under what could be just really negative and trying. And so we've just done a lot of informal communication in addition to, just formal, but kind of reminding our department that, we're in this together and we're going to be fine, but we've all got to be part of the solution. And the response has been really good. I think we've got a great group. So.
I'll just add, I really appreciate you being here again. Very appreciative of the teamwork at that table and the importance of that. I, in my role, often hear from lots of folks, and the most positive feedback I've heard is your appointment in this position. So I'm going to take that and run with it because I really love hearing when there's good things that folks want to reach out and tell me about, and that has been one of our highlights. So just appreciate you saying yes and for your continued support and leadership at WSU. So it feels like you're the right leader at the right time right now.
Well, I appreciate that.
Thank you.
I'm happy to do it. So I appreciate it.
So are there any objections to moving our future action item to an action item at tomorrow's Board of Regents meeting? Nope. Okay. I am going to call for a break. I'll pass it back to Chair Shower, but I will also pass the baton to Regent Cerna, who will take the rest of the Finance Committee forward as I go try to catch an airplane.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Jeanette.
Thank you. Okay. So let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break. So let's try to be back by 3:35 so that I don't have to hit the gavel. We'll get started, but maybe give Leslie a minute to take a break, walk around the room, and Regent Stern is going to get ready to take on the committee. Thank you all.
That's why I'm sitting this far away.
I know, I
so
know,
get a
yeah.
little bit of-
All right, we're gonna go ahead and reconvene our Finance and Administration Committee. And I will turn it over to Regent Cerna to continue the committee.
All right, I'm subbing in now. Here we go. Leslie will, and Provost Chilton will present the next future action item, tuition rates for the Masters of Energy Conscious Construction degree.
Thank you. I don't know if you have anything to add to this, but this is a request to add the tuition rate for a program that was approved last month at the March Regents meeting. It's a Master's of Energy Conscious Construction brought forward by the School of Design and Construction in the Boylan College of Engineering and Architecture. Because this is a self-sustaining program and not one that is like traditional graduate programs, what they do is look at the market, look at student demand and other programs that are comparable, and they have recommended a rate of $850 per credit hour for this to move forward.
All right. Are there any objections to moving this future action item to an action item at tomorrow's Board of Regents meeting? I don't hear any objections, so we'll move on. We'll do it. All right. Leslie will be joined now by Pullman Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs, Ramondo Nash. They're going to present the next future action item, which is establishing the WSU Pullman Cougs Against Hunger Student Food Pantry Fee. And they'll also be joined virtually is the Graduate and Professional Student Association Community Affairs Chair, Madison Honig.
Okay, thank you so much. And thank you to our, oh, is she there? Our student for joining us. The request is to establish the Pullman Cougs Against Hunger Student Pantry Fee. This is a fee that we already have in place for our undergraduate students, but our graduate students recently had a ballot referendum to approve this item, and I'll turn it over to our student if she is still available.
Yes, I'm here. Yeah, so this is a $5 per semester fee that would be for all fee-paying Pullman graduate and professional students, so that we can contribute to the Cougar Food Pantry the same way that ASWSU, the undergraduate students, have been doing. I'm also happy to answer any questions if folks have any.
Any questions? Nope, not on our end. Thank you very much, Madison. We appreciate it. All right, are there any objections? Anything else you want to add to this, Leslie or Ramondo?
No, sir.
Ramondo was probably figuring out. No, I don't know. All right, are there any objections to moving this future action item to an action item at tomorrow's Board of Regents meeting? None, okay. For our last future action item, the BAVI Range Faculty Practice Plan, and Leslie will be joined by Daryl DeWall and everybody else here, Matt
I
Skinner, or
think
just
Matt
you?
Skinner, and I believe Daniel may still be on
Right.
in virtual world with us, and we
Right.
are not being joined by Dean Record.
Okay.
Actually, where is Daryl?
Yeah, Danielle's there.
Okay, this one we really can't go forward because I can't even fake this one with the apple.
I was
so.
curious.
You know what, Leslie? Yes, you can.
No,
Absolutely, you can.
no.
All right.
Thank you. We're gonna look for Daryl, if you don't mind.
Oh, okay.
I think he's
You
really
can present,
important.
right? President Schultz?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Has there been a Daryl DeWall sighting?
Yeah.
Seems like a soundtrack
Yeah.
during the break. Here he comes. It's the business of the.
Thank you, Mr. DeWall, for joining us this afternoon.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm so sorry.
It's okay. This is the theme of the day.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
So what we're bringing this forward to, we've had a conversation with you before.
Right.
Range Health is the separate 501c3 that is organized as the faculty practice plan for the LCNS Floyd College of Medicine. The challenge that we are encountering is that the entity is no longer economically viable to move forward, but it yet still provides a critical service to our teaching community and to the medical community here in Spokane and frankly around the state. And what we are asking you, as well as the board of Range Health, is to bring this operation in-house so that it becomes part of our ongoing budget process and is subject to the same discussion that any other entity within the university is. Might you add to that?
Wow, look at you.
I didn't need you.
See?
Anything else you'd like to add to the, oh, Question, go ahead.
Question, so it's a 501c3.
Yes.
Yes,
It has its own board.
It
yes.
does, which is
And-
made up of the university employees, however.
That's part of my question.
Yes.
So there's no problem with this transaction.
Our understanding, and we pursued an understanding of this, is that the board for Bobby Range is affirmative in regard to they would like to see a transition too. We would need to see that accomplished as well. That they would move forward to dissolution and to be folded into the College of Medicine
There's
proper.
employees,
Yes.
and that all folds in.
That,
Also.
Come forward, Matt.
the board
Charles.
said,
No, I'm saying there's a board, and then there's also employees.
yes, there are employees.
So-
Just let me clarify, sorry. No, you're okay, you're okay. Just clarify. The 501c3 has no employees of 501c3. All employees working in Range are on staff assignment. They are WSU employees assigned to support that 501c3. So there's no employee reactions that would be needed to be planned.
So if this goes forward, it just dissolves and the board goes away, Range goes away.
The entity would be dissolved.
The
not
entity.
501c3.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And the brand,
The brand could or could not, it could transfer
Yeah.
if WSU chose to use
TBD.
that brand.
Danielle, is there anything you want to add from a legal standpoint?
No, I mean, that's pretty much the summary of where we are and where we're going. We do need the range board to vote to dissolve and to go in-house within the College of Medicine. We have a lot of activities that we'll need to undertake prior to moving range in-house. So we have a lot of due diligence that needs to occur. We need to scope the activities and determine an appropriate budget for the activities. We'll need to identify business and compliance steps necessary to operate range within WSU, and a bunch of other things that will need to occur, due diligence, transfer of assets, you name it. So we've got a lot of work ahead of us, but this is just to get the nod from the Board of Regents, and then we'll go to range and get the nod from their board. And if everybody's on board, we'll move forward.
Any other questions? Any other explanations? Okay, I think we move on. So this is just a future action item, right? Okay, great, thank
The
you.
only of the future actions that truly is a
Okay.
future action.
All right, all right. Okay, Mr. DeWald, you can go get lost now. Thank you very much. Just kidding. Next, we move on to our action items. These items were reviewed and discussed in depth at the March meeting. First and second action items will be presented by Leslie, Chancellor Chilton, and Ramonda Nash. ASWSU Vice President Maccabee Verndorf will be joining this presentation.
And they're making their way up. The first two items were presented as a future action item at our January meeting, and then the work of the student committees was underway throughout the spring and has concluded. And Maccabee and Ramondo will provide that to you. You need that.
Yeah, so for those of you who haven't met me, hi, I'm Maccabee Warndorf. I'm the ASWSU Vice President and Chair of the 2024-2025 SNAP Committee. I am a double major in accounting and finance, and I'm finishing up my 5th year at WSU Pullman. So yeah, we will just get a little bit into the process. So SNAPs are only supposed to support non-academic services that enrich student experience on the WSU campuses. The annual fee is charged to students who are enrolled in at least 10 credits, and the fee rate is determined by a committee that is comprised of students who are nominated by the chancellor. And yeah, we are responsible for hearing from campus groups about their needs and programming opportunities. And we review annual and one-time budget requests, and then we deliberate and recommend funding based on those proposals. Getting to the next slide. So these are the system-wide SNAP fee allocation recommendations and rates. Yeah, as you can just see that up there. I don't really know how much I should get into that. Yeah, just moving on to the next one. So yeah, getting into the deliberations for 2024-2025 Pullman. we are estimating $8,330,730 of fee-based revenue is available, and that was based on conservative enrollment projections. And there's a balance of $3 million, around $3,078,494 in reserves. And we based our decisions on allocations and fees rate setting on the overall impact on students on our campus. And just wanted to note that not all proposals were funded, and some proposals only received partial funding. And getting into the allocations, they're on the right side, but the committee is recommending an increase of 3% for fiscal year 24-25 academic. And this is in line with tuition increases. And for our allocations, we are allocating $7,827,789 of fee-based revenue. And the committee decided to use $607,679 of reserve funds. We believe that we have a healthy reserve balance and that it was in the best interest of our students on our campus to dip into that balance. Yeah, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
We appreciate the work that you've done. This is impressive. And, leading a committee, the level of student fees and administration, that's a really big task you've taken on. And so we really appreciate it. And we appreciate hearing from our student government structure. So thank you for coming today. Thank you for the incredible work you've done over the year. And are committing to next year? Did I hear that right?
No, I'm not. I am graduating in 2 weeks.
Ooh, so we'll see you at graduation.
You will.
Leslie might have a job for you.
I'll echo that as a president who did SNA for Tri-Cities. I can't even imagine what someone was like. So great work on that SNA work. And I know that it's, difficult to make those deliberations and communicate and be a part of that community. So I really appreciate that work. And of course, congratulations again.
You have way too good a personality to be an accountant.
Oh.
Hey.
Oh.
Ouch.
Well, you could do stand up on the side, maybe. So there you go.
That-
Thank you very
We'll
much.
take him out behind the after. Straighten out his attitude for you.
Thank you.
You also serve as the vice president for ASWCU overall for Pullman, and I imagine you probably also serve on other committees for ASWCU, am I right?
Yeah, I serve on tech fee. So I'm not the chair of tech fee.
Yeah.
And then I can't even really name them. I mean, I do
Yeah,
a lot of work with the Senate
yeah,
and stuff.
exactly.
But
You've
yeah,
just shown extraordinary leadership over the last year and more, so I really do appreciate your work.
thank you. Congratulations.
Well, thank you for what you've done, and we appreciate it, and good luck.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
All right. Thank you, thank you. All right. Moving on now to present action item number 3, 4, and 5. Leslie, Chancellor Chilton, and Ramonda Nash will be joined by Associate Vice Chancellor of Student Affairs, Sean Green.
I'm sure Sean is in the room. All three of these were presented by our students at the Tri-Cities campus.
Okay.
The first of these, the Chinook fee, we are requesting a $5 per semester change. It is a 5% change. I'll do all three of these and we can answer questions. It might be easier now that Sean's joined us. The second item, the Compton Union Building, the Cub, the request is for a $10 per semester fee. That's an 8.33% change year over year. And the third of these is the Student Recreation Center, the SRC, under University Recreation, is a $7 per semester fee, a 4% change. Both the fees for the Cub and the SRC also have a pro rata change for the students who are less than full-time.
By the way, I left out some information here. Sorry. I just want to mention that at the March meeting, we had the privilege to have 2 students that co-presented these future action items. Grant Ricard, Chair of the University Recreation Board, and also Crystal De Los Santos, a student member of the Cub Advisory Board. And we appreciate it. So is there anything else you want to add to this?
Any questions?
Sean? Any questions? All right, no questions. Thank you very much. All right, next we have Leslie and Vancouver Chancellor Mel Neshammer. Maybe we have.
Well, if you don't want to
folks
come
right
up,
here.
I've got it. This is one that I neglected to bring forward last month as
Okay.
an action item. I just missed that it was ready to go for action. This is the technology fee allocation for the Vancouver campus. This was approved as a future action item, and the student committee has made the allocation request for approximately $135,000 in student tech fees that are collected.
And Mr. Netzhammer is making an appearance. Thank you very much.
This is like the theme.
All right. He's here all afternoon, as long as we can
Yes.
find him. Thank you. Anything else you want to add to this,
Or should be ready to go.
Mr. Vancouver Chancellor?
Do you want to answer that
We good?
question that they had about the tech fee for Vancouver? No, I'm kidding.
All right. Well, thank you for being here. No, appreciate it. All right.
Absolutely.
We move right along.
Okay.
Okay.
Before you,
Yeah.
I mean, I also want to make sure that anybody watching thinks that we are making, doing this in a respectful way.
Yes.
I think you might just describe really quickly where these things came from. This is a very deliberative process to get to the board. It's not you sitting in your office doing this. I think it would be good, maybe just really quickly, a brief description of where this came from.
Of course. So our students themselves passed the student technology fee. They, within that, which the Board of Regents approved a number of years ago, within that, they created a process that is driven by the students in a tech fee committee. And it's the one fee on our campus because of the process they put in place that also goes through ASWSUV and gets approved by student government. So it's the one fee that has two student approval processes before it comes to me for that. One of the interesting things, I think it's first on the list, is funding for printing. When it was passed, that was how it got passed, that the students promised free printing if this was passed. The interesting thing is the world has changed so much that they feel, because of that, they feel very strongly about keeping it in the budget. You'll see it every year, it's less and less, but it's always there and it always goes unused. And so there's also a bit of a reserve that they are tapping into that is from the fact that students are not printing any longer.
Yeah.
And we faculty are not taking paper homework anymore.
Yeah.
They upload it onto our electronic system and we grade it.
Well, thanks to the students for passing this to begin with, so that we appreciate that.
It's been very good for the campus. It has allowed us to invest in a number of places over the years. They are really responsible for getting Wi-Fi out into our parking lots, into spaces that previously did not have Wi-Fi. And so the coverage has improved very much because of the tech fee.
Right. Any questions? Anything else? Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank
All
you
right.
very much. I apologize, I was outside.
That's okay. Next, Leslie is going to be joined by Matt Skinner and Daniel Hess to present the proposed revisions to the Board of Regents debt management policy.
Excellent. Thank you. And I'll turn that right over to Matt.
Okay, thank you. As the board is aware, state law authorizes the Board of Regents to govern the issuance of any debt or forms of other bonds or other indebtedness for the university. And this proposal will make some minor adjustments to the Board of Regents policy number 5 regarding debt. While minor, they are important clarifying steps that we think will be beneficial to the board and the university. If I could just highlight those for members of the board here as you prepare for action item tomorrow. It highlights that the board has delegated authority to the president or the chief financial officer for refunding of bonds for savings. It clarifies that operating and capital leases are not governed underneath this debt policy. Rather, operating or capital leases fall under purchase of goods and services delegations that are in place elsewhere by the board. simplifies the savings thresholds when we do a refinancing or refunding to allow us to achieve savings while still making sure the savings are meaningful and worthwhile to the university. And finally, it does create some flexibility both for Leslie as the executive vice president and for the board to consider different debt ratios and metrics that you would find most useful to track the health of our debt portfolio over time. So those are the 4 major changes, and we'll bring this as an action item tomorrow.
Okay. Anything else? Any questions? All right. We'll move on to our next item, and it's Leslie and Matt again to present the Workday contract renewal.
Great, thank you. So as the board recognizes, it's hard to believe it's been almost 5 years that we've been using contracted with Workday. So that existing contract will expire this summer. We've been actively negotiating with Workday to explore a 10-year renewal for Workday. Workday powers our core HR, finance, and grants accounting and budgeting tools for the university. The proposal in this action item is a 10-year contract extension with a total not to exceed $22.3 million over that 10-year period, or approximately $2.23 million per year in cost. The only thing that would change there is the license for Workday is also tied to the total number of employees at the university. So if we would start to see sizable growth in the number of employees at WSU over the next 10 years, there might be need to amend that contract slightly to account for those additional employees. This represents about a $440,000 one-time increase to the cost of Workday, and then that would remain flat for the next 10 years, that annual cost of the license. And for your reference, we did include at the request of Regent Ramos a very brief summary of some highlights of some improvements that we've made through the modernization initiative. That was hard to choose 10 to put on a list, but we tried to keep it to 10. If that would be of interest, that's included in your materials.
So Matt, is the contract just for potential continuing improvements? Or is it maintenance? Or, I mean, what is it paying for?
Yeah, the contract is the license to use
Oh, it's a license. Okay.
the software itself.
Thank you.
Great question.
So are we at the stage where any improvements will be made by us, right? We're not depending on them to come in and fix things anymore. It's up to us now to massage this to get it to do exactly what we
Yeah,
want.
really good question. We're fortunate to have a fabulous team that supports Workday, and they've really developed a lot of expertise in-house. If I could brag about them for a minute, which we don't do often, they're actually called by other universities to find out how to do things, which is really nice that we can help each other out. We don't anticipate using consultants to help with things unless sometimes if we take on a significant initiative like position control, there's a chance we might consult with an expert as we design that, not a large expenditure, but we might consult with some other firms to figure out some new functionality moving forward.
Thank you.
And position control was not a module that we implemented at the beginning of Workday, and we may bring that in to better align the budget dollars with the actual positions.
Any other questions?
Just a comment. You know, I think we saw some headlines about the other research university in the state and their Workday implementation. And I just want to, again, commend our team for doing such a great job. We didn't have these huge cost overruns. We, of course, had that valley where, you know, there was people trying to get used to it. But I think overall, our transition was about as smooth as it could be, you know, virtually anywhere. And I think now we see some of the financial reporting, it's like, thank goodness we have this system implemented. And it just, when something goes well, nobody says much. When it goes badly, everybody talks about it. I just think this has really been, from a risk management point of view, just an amazing positive journey. So Matt, I know you've done a lot with this, along with HRS and IT, but congrats. It's great to see us renewing this and moving forward.
Thank you. Thank you. Anything else? Anybody else?
I might just add that I recall during this process that we did slow down a minute because we knew that we needed to ensure that there's internal buy-in and changes difficult. Implementing something like this is really difficult. And I'm just continually impressed with how well this has been able to be implemented. And so, sometimes good strategy isn't just advancing forward, it's being able to pivot and then achieve that outcome. And so just to echo President Schultz's feedback, this is really important work, and really should be on that risk register, because if I recall correctly, when I came on the board, the system was maybe a little archaic and a few knew how to actually utilize it. And this is just moving us in the direction we need to be. So thank you for your leadership.
All right. Next, Leslie is going to be joined by Associate Vice President for Facilities Services, Olivia Yang, and Vice President for External Affairs and Government Relations, Glenda Becker-Fenter, to present the 2025-2027 State Capital Budget Request.
We're here early so we don't get shamed for wandering off.
Good job. But it's a lot of fun shaming people. So.
I know, I didn't want to try. You want me to wander off?
No, it's okay. You're here now. All right, take it away.
All right, so this is one of the action items we have that we discussed last time. And this is the 25-27 state requests for capital funding. We're asking for $175 million for the next 25-27 biennium. As you know, we have three chunks. One is minor capital, a group of projects under $2 million each. Minor capital renewal for building renewal is $40 million. Minor capital for program renewal is $20 million. We have two of what we call sustained investment, meaning they're phases. One is the replacement of Field Hall, which is an old science building. We're replacing it with an integrated science buildings in the Pullman campus. And the other one is a new team health building on this campus, which includes the demolition, we hope, of the old Jensen Bird in its entirety. So it's followed by a series of what we call standalones, which are mostly thematic, system-wide improvements to various aspects of the university's business. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. Happy to take questions.
But importantly, I want to point out that in that list of projects does include some specific things for the extension as well.
Mhm. Oh,
So
yes.
not just the campus's extension is
Yes,
included.
yes, yes.
If I could make a comment, two things. The first is just, I think the board may be aware of it. This represents a larger ask than we've done in the past for capital for the state legislature. And, I think it was important. We've had a lot of success, and I appreciate our government relations team and all the people involved, but this was a step forward to say, we think we can do a bit more. And that's always carries with a little trepidation after we've done it a certain way for a while, but I think that's a positive. The second thing is, Olivia, maybe you talked about this last time, but I think when people look at these lists, this isn't a random list. There's a clear process. There's an evaluation scheme that we go through. It's not what Kirk thinks is a great project. It's number one or whatever, but there's a careful way that this is done prior to bringing to the board. And just again, before we approve it tomorrow, maybe just a brief, how did you get to the list that's here? I think would be helpful.
So the backup attach gets into more detail, but essentially what we have is, first of all, we do this on a biennial process because most of our capital funding comes from the state. And so we work backwards towards the odd number years, so 25, 27. So what we do is on the even number years, we have what we call a call for needs. So, what are your capital needs? This is somewhat different from what we did a long time ago, where we said it's a call for projects. And we didn't want to do that. We said, we just need to know what your needs are so that we can help you formulate what those needs are. So there's a call for needs. It's due at the end of the even number year. And we sort them and we prioritize them. We send them out for help in evaluating them, send them back out to the leadership team and prioritize what they are. Some of what we do, and that's where the standalone, the sustained investment comes in. What we try to do, and this Kirk alluded to President Schultz alluded to this, is that we have this target total that we hit for. And so sometimes you have a project that's 60 million, 70 million. We have to cut it up and say, this biennium, we're only doing the getting it ready, getting the site ready. We're doing only the design. We're, in the case of the integrated science building, for example, we really cut it up so that we improve the adjacent buildings, Eastlick and Abelson, so that people could get out of Heald into those buildings. And then we come and ask for demolition and design of Heald, and then next biennium will be asking for the construction. So you have, so it's important that the priorities are followed, and that's one of the messages that, yes, we are asking for 175 versus the 150 that we had asked for in the past. But if there are cuts that have to be made, then please follow our priorities because they're kind of connected to each other across the biennium. So that's in essence the sort of priorities that we are making. We try to be very transparent about it. We acknowledge that this is a capital request to fund capital improvements across the system. And I kind of like to say, you have a far-flung empire that we're taking care of. And so there are a lot of needs, and we have to be very careful how to fund the most important part, not necessarily chunks of big new shiny buildings.
If I may just add that, you know, over my 4 years, I've seen this process really transform to become much more transparent. And I really want to credit External Affairs and Government Relations and the Office of State Relations, working, of course, with support of Olivia. You know, is you watching the game over there or some game somewhere? You know, we asked all units to submit the needs as Olivia mentioned, and then we viewed them with respect to, is this, not only is it a worthwhile project, but is this the appropriate avenue for funding said project? And will it be successful? And how does it relate to the system-wide strategic plan and the campus plans? And so, you know, then we make recommendations to Kirk ultimately, who has to give approval for the capital proposal. But we let people know what the results were. We also asked questions of units if we had them. And I don't want to speak for our deans and our chancellors, but the process from where I sit has become much more transparent and strategic.
And actually, what Elizabeth mentioned made me realize I was remiss in the thing I keep talking about, which is the alignment of capital investment towards our greatest physical need, which is deferred maintenance. We have at least $1.8 billion across the system. And so one of the criteria, we have dual criteria. On the one hand is the classic, how does this support the university's mission in teaching, research, and outreach? But we also say, how does this solution to your need help us in optimizing space so that we can move people from a lot of not so good space into maybe smaller space, but more functional space. And so there's a dual set of criteria that we talk about. I mean, I can't believe I missed a chance to talk about deferred maintenance. But I did.
Go ahead, Beth. So the prior number that you submitted was 150 to this
150
175?
in the biennium that we have now. It's 150. We're gonna ask for 25 million more.
If I recall from our previous strategy, you were mentioning part of the credibility established with Olympia is coming close to that number that you requested. There wasn't a lot of, you're asking for 175 and you want 175. It's not like you're hoping for 150.
Well, I think it's strange because I don't want to use the past trends to predict what will happen, because for if nothing else, the members change.
Yeah. And we're gonna have a lot of new members next year and a new governor. So we're gonna have to make sure we're articulating that this is a statewide reach. This is within a responsible approach financially to meet the needs of the university. And we're gonna have to educate those new members and the new administration that are coming in about this too. So, yeah.
And we have a strategic advantage by having extension in each county and having the campuses across the state. And each of our chancellors then can help support the whole thing because they're talking to their local delegation. And this is where the strength of WSU can really help us to move this across the finish line in a different way if we're just talking to people in a certain geographic area. So we've tried to do it to push the envelope a little bit because we have more needs. And I also want to emphasize that it's a prioritized list. And when we sit down with a legislature who goes, what legislator who says, well, what about this project and where is it? I go, that's a prioritized list. And I think that consistency in the way we do that makes a lot of difference. So our priorities don't shift from member to member, because that also becomes a kiss of death. You know, they go, well, they don't really have a priority. So just it's a really refined, it's a better process than when I got here, and it'll continue to improve and evolve, you know, as the legislature changes. So.
Any other questions? Here, go.
So deferred maintenance is a real cost, and it's something that is the easiest to hit snooze on. I am curious, and I don't know this is the right group to even make this comment, but we need to increase enrollment. And one of the key ways to increase enrollment is to ensure that we have residence halls in Pullman that make it on the short list to be attractive for WSU students to show up and want to be part of our, you know, WSU experience. And so I see here, there's a couple halls. I don't, this is going to be my ignorance. Are there any residence halls at all in the mix for?
So I hate to be the one to have to explain this. Auxiliaries are not state funded. So we've been, and it's too bad Sean had to leave. We've been working with Sean for the last, I don't know, 6 months on prioritizing his needs. So it's a system, much prioritization, much like what we're doing for the state funded projects, and say, here's your portfolio of res halls, UREC, you know, Chinook, and the family apartments and all that. So what is needed and what can we do every year? And they use their cash, and that's a proposal that they have to make to the leadership that says, these are things we want to make improvements on with the cash we have from our own revenue. It's a little bit like all the other auxiliaries, you know, athletics, parking, student affairs, they have kind of their own money. It's not state funded. So we try to be consistent in how we identify the needs and how we prioritize them and what makes the most sense, which project needs to be bundled together or whatever.
So that can run simultaneously.
Yes,
To
in
this,
fact,
and
they,
is not dependent on state
No.
funding for us to be prioritizing our residents.
correct, correct. In fact, for student affairs, it's an annual thing, not a biannual thing. So we can, you know, move faster.
Okay, great. Thank you for that clarity.
So can I just clarify something? So if we want to build a new residence hall, we don't get state funds for that? We have to go, okay,
They're expected to be self-funding
yeah.
through
okay.
housing and dining fees that they charge.
Got it.
And it is on the capital priorities for the campaign. It's on my list of priorities. You know, it's not often considered a sexy item to fund with philanthropic dollars, but if we do have an opportunity to do that, that's another way.
But that's how we draw kids.
Yes, I know it, but
Yeah.
as auxiliaries, it's not eligible. It,
Yeah.
it would not be, it would not even be considered by the state.
So are there projects currently on the Pullman campus for residencies that is being remodeled? Something's going on?
We do have a list, as I said, we've been working with Sean Armando's staff, crew, team. And we've identified in the Pullman campus several buckets, you know, there's housing, res halls, family apartments, there's food, south side, et cetera.
We have Ramondo who's going to speak.
And recreation facilities. And so we anticipate, we're projecting what the proposed carry forward could be and how we could apply those towards that. And there's been a lot of good discussion and debate that we facilities have had as a advisor to student affairs on what makes sense, how can we bundle them and things like that.
Mondo, you want to add something?
Sure, thank you. Excuse me, sure, thank you. And I love a board that talks my language. I like this. Yeah, so
I've already actually met with Olivia and her team in terms of our need to begin to address some of the deferred maintenance challenges that we have, as well as determining ways for us to, we have students of today who don't want to live in residence halls that we have today. Figuring out ways that we can begin the process for construction and those sorts of pieces. One of the pieces that I talked about, though, is whatever it is that we do has to fit within the envelope of WSU, right? And it has to make sense and it has to work within our processes as well. However, I do think that we're behind and we have to figure out ways to begin to chip away at certain things while also working with the campaign and those sorts of pieces to try to help us begin to catch up a little bit.
Well, just as perspective, I'm the youngest in my family, and I used to visit my siblings going to the Pullman campus. So I have an older brother. He was there in 1970, and he stayed in Goldsworthy. It wasn't a prize back then. And that's been a while.
100%, yeah. Yeah, one of the things I did even before I started was I came to campus for a visit so I could be a fly on the wall, right? And part of what I did was I just went on a normal admissions tour with the families just to hear what was being said. And they used the phrase that our residence halls are vintage. And I said, well, they could. I'll take vintage, but there's not a lot of students today who want to live in vintage. And so it's a priority for myself as well. It's a priority for our students. Every interview, part of my process, we talked about the halls and the need to begin to do that work. And it's a priority for my staff members as well.
I like vintage, and I lived in Stevenson South back in 1971, which still stands there. And from what I understand, hasn't changed a heck of a lot. So,
Is Waller still standing?
Yes. It's
It's
there,
still standing, but it's offline. Yeah, it's offline. We have work to do, and so we'll definitely need you all support as we dive into that
It's a
work.
direct correlation to enrollment.
Yeah.
100%.
And recruitment, so.
Glad to have you on the team.
yes,
Thank you. I appreciate that.
yeah. I'll go fix that.
All
All right. Anybody else have anything? All right. Thank you very much. I think we have a final action item, and it's Leslie and Olivia on the proposed revision to Washington Administrative Code 504-50 Small Works Roster.
Yeah, so the background on this, to give you the proper context, is that about a year and a half ago, we were involved in an effort to do two things. On the one hand, to create a state certification of small businesses patterned under the federal small business, except of course that the federal dollar level is way higher, and so the state level is smaller. And the other thing we were doing was to work with a large group of stakeholders across the state in revising, updating, streamlining the small works roster, which allows, what the roster really does is it sets up categories of work: general construction, plumbing, mechanical, excavation, whatever. Projects up to 350, you as a contractor sign up to get on the roster. You as an owner can then sign up to use the roster. So if you have a general construction project, you go to the people on the roster and say, here's a project, give me a bid. And it simplifies and accelerates the process. And so we view it as a win-win for the owners, the public owners, as well as the small business contractors. So in order to the RCW around small works roster and the RCW creating state certified small businesses take effect July 1 of 2024. We were given a year to get the mechanics in place. And so we need a WAC to determine how we, WSU, will implement the small works roster rules, allowing us to set up our own roster. So that's what it's about. We actually had a hearing mid-March. It was extremely uneventful. Nobody showed
That's
up.
a good thing, right?
Huh?
That's a good thing, right?
Yes, it's a very good thing. Yeah, good. We like it when nobody comes. So it was quite uneventful, and so we're moving the WAC to you for your approval so that when come July, we can start to set up our roster.
Thank you very much. Any questions, comments?
I'm gonna just add that this is awesome. This is meeting Washingtonians where they are. This is very much values oriented. Appreciate your leadership here.
Thank you very much, Olivia
Thank you.
and Leslie.
Yep.
Now, these action items will come before the board for consideration at tomorrow's Board of Regents meeting. Want to note also that today's meeting packet also included a written report on the current major capital projects, and that's the end of the Finance Committee. I believe. Am I right about that? Yes, this concludes the Finance and Administration Committee meeting. I turn it back over to Chair Schauer.
Thank you. We are at the end of our committee meeting day, and I just want to share that tomorrow we have a full agenda. You will see the board continue to engage as we've done in the committee meeting. So those of you that expect our board meeting to end before lunch, that's great if it happens, but we are anticipating that we will spend the time that we need to with you in that formal board meeting around these items that come up. So as much as we want to move quickly through, we also want to spend the time that we need to engage with each other and to engage with you. We have a few more viewers of our board meeting than perhaps we do for the day before. So with that, I want to just offer my appreciation. There is a lot happening. We are near the end of the school year. I know that there's probably vacations planned for the minute graduation's over. And so I just want to express my gratitude, President Schultz, and for the team that's here and that may be watching. I look forward to a great day of conversation tomorrow in our board meeting. And with that, I will close the meeting. Thank you.